25.22 is absolutely filled with rune changes, as there are 10 different runes being adjusted. Skarner is finally getting buffed after being the weakest jungler for such a long time, and then to everyone's delight, Yone is buffed for a second patch in a row. So we'll have a complete breakdown of all the changes and an update to the solo queue tier list for every single role as we get set for patch 25.22. But first, some hard truths. YouTube is built for the algorithm, not your LP. That means clickbait titles, junk food topics, and stretching simple tips for watch time. We're part of that system too, just like every guide and YouTube channel. And because every video is randomly surfaced to you as a singular guide and topic, advice often contradicts what you just watched. No context, no plan, more confusion. On our website at SkillCapped, however, we're free from all that, allowing us to focus on what actually matters. We teach in the most efficient way to really rank you up fast, with the same premium editing and challenger level coaches you see here, just without the algorithm's hoops. Start with our essentials courses for every role, updated for season 15. These are meticulously planned step-by-step guides that build your fundamentals in the right order. Once you've finished essentials, move into the advanced courses. Deep dive wave control, advanced mechanics, the proven bronze to diamond climb paths, and literal world record jungle clears for each jungler, all structured so lessons stack instead of contradict. While you follow these learning paths, we also release our popular challenger walkthroughs. New sessions every week showing how to abuse the best meta champs for your elo. Supported with an AMA section below each video, which we always respond to. We back it with a climb 5 divisions improvement guarantee while you're actively using SkillCapped, plus a 30-day refund change of mind policy on top of that, so there's literally no risk. Stop trying to mix and match random guides and start following a structured path far away from all the noise. Click the limited time discount link below to join SkillCapped today. So we have 2 keystone runes on the buff list for this patch, and first up is Hail of Blades. The melee attack speed ratio is being increased from 140 to 160%. The champions that will benefit the most from this buff include Pyke and Shaco, while champs like Tryndamere, AP, Cho'Gath, Echo mid lane, Vi, Master Yi, Poppy support, and Naafiri mid can also look to take advantage. Guardian is next in line for a few buffs, with its base shield going up from 45 scaling to 150 to 45 scaling to 180, and the AP ratio for the shield is being increased from 15 to 25%. So this does make Guardian slightly more viable on certain enchanters, but that AP ratio buff definitely won't be enough to make Guardian the #1 option by any means. We likely don't see a big shift toward Guardian due to these buffs, and it will just provide a small indirect boost to the usual Guardian users like Braum, Renata, and Rakan. Many ADCs will see a small indirect buff for this patch, with the healing from Bloodline being increased from 5.25 to 6% at max stacks. Urgot and Yorick have also been Bloodline users in recent patches, so they will be liking this buff as well. Niv's Cloak will receive a buff with its movement speed going up from 14 scaling to 40% to 15 scaling to 45%. So nothing too massive here, but it will help out a wide variety of champions with Hecarim, Vladimir, Rumble, Zoe, Singed, Ivern, Nunu, Blitzcrank, Galio, Riven, and Alistar all being able to benefit. There hasn't been a whole lot of variety when it comes down to rune shard selection, so Riot wants to change that by buffing the movement speed shard going from 2 to 2.5% movement speed. So this likely becomes a solid option now on a bunch of supports like Bard, Poppy, and Blitzcrank, where additional movement speed can be really impactful, not only for roam plays, but to help line up their key spells. For example, the power of Poppy's E is directly tied to how much movement speed you have, because if you aren't able to move quick enough in a specific direction to get the angle to stun the enemy into the wall, then it can be a huge deciding factor as to whether you win a skirmish or not. And then we have a buff to the Tenacity rune shard, with Tenacity and Slow Resist going up from 10 to 15%. So by going for Tenacity, it does mean you have to skip out on health, which would still likely feel kinda bad despite this buff. Top lane champs are the ones who could look to benefit from this the most, because if you're playing a fighter top lane champ into a tank who has a lot of CC, then if you aren't really worried about dying in lane and don't need that additional health, opting for Tenacity should be a solid play. Health should still remain the better pick for the majority of games due to the consistent power it will provide, but in select situations, there will be an argument to running Tenacity. The Cashback rune is getting a buff for this patch, with its gold refund per legendary item purchase going from 6 to 8%. There wasn't a single champion who was taking a cashback at above a 50% pick rate in 25.21, so we'll have to see if that changes moving forward. The champs running the rune the most in recent patches were Sion, Ivern, Misfortune, Fiddlesticks, and Morgana, so they will benefit the most from this buff. Cashback isn't the only inspiration rune that is getting buffed, as Triple Tonic will have its Elixir of Avarice gold increased from 40 to 60, while the Elixir of Force adaptive damage is going up from 20 to 30. So what likely happens as a result of these buffs is that you should now highly consider taking Triple Tonic instead of Biscuits in specific matchups. For example, Veigar, Syndra, and Misfortune all like to go first strike, which means they need to choose between Biscuits or Triple Tonic. If the lane opponent you're up against is very easy, and you know you aren't in any threat of dying in the 1v1, then taking Triple Tonic for more early game snowball power will definitely be the better option. And going for Triple Tonic in place of Biscuits is even better now, due to the fact that the healing on Biscuits is being reduced from 2% max health to 1.5% max health. So many champs have Biscuits in their recommended rune page, but unless you're actually going to be able to take advantage of the sustain that they offer, opting for an alternative like Boots, Cosmic Insight, or Triple Tonic will be way stronger moving forward. The one keystone rune that is getting nerfed for this patch is Phase Rush, with its slow resist dropping from 75 to 50%. This nerf will most heavily impact Ryze, Hecarim, Orianna, Taliyah, Nunu, Vladimir, Gragas, Galio, and Jace. It's most likely not enough of a nerf to actually shift those champions away from taking the rune though. So even though Jungle Volibear has been a top tier pick for a while, top lane has been in a much weaker spot, so Riot has a few buffs aimed at helping top lane. Base armor is being increased from 31 to 35. Base AD is up from 60 to 62, which gives Trinity Force more viability on the pick. Q movement speed is going down though, from 12 scaling to 28% to 12 scaling to 26%. With top lane Volibear, you max your W out first, so this nerf doesn't hurt him as much as it will in the jungle. And then there is a nerf to slow down Volibear in the jungle a bit, with his E max damage cap going down, but this one won't really influence top lane. So even with these buffs going through, top lane Volley has been exceptionally bad lately, sitting around at 47% win rate, and we don't think these buffs will be enough to push that up to a competitive level. So for now, we'll be leaving Volley in the top lane B tier, but there is a chance we move him into A for mid patch if the buffs do land a bit more impactful than expected. So this will be one of the lighter patches that we've seen for top lane in a while, as Volley and Yone are the only two champs being adjusted. The Yone buffs consist of his Q damage going up by 5, which we don't think will be quite enough to propel him up the tier list, so he's going to remain placed in B. Malphite is just really running away with being the most OP top lane champ right now, so we are leaving him alone on top and moving Garen and Cassio down into S tier. Malphite is absolutely dominating in every single elo bracket at the moment, so he's just the most consistently reliable top lane pick regardless of what rank you're in. The one rune page that will negatively impact a bunch of top lane champs is the nerf to Biscuits. Biscuits is taken on so many different top laners, and with the loss in sustain, it does indirectly give a boost to ranged picks like Kennen, Quinn, and Cassio. Probably not enough to shift the tier list positioning of those champs, but ranged tops in general have been really liking these past two patches, with Doran's Shield, Second Wind, and Biscuits all getting nerfed. Quinn, Cass, and Kennen are all S tier already anyways, so they're really good picks to consider for 25.22. So heading over to the jungle now, Talon is on the nerf list with his passive monster damage dropping from 110 to 100%. So Talon is always a more difficult jungler for us to place on the tier list, just because his success varies a ton based on rank. In the elite tiers of play in recent patches, he's been an S tier worthy pick, which is why he's getting nerfed, but in the lower elos, he actually underperforms, sitting below a 49% win rate in gold and 47% in silver. So because we do put more of a weight on low elo viability as opposed to high elo viability when making our tier list, we had Talon placed in the jungle A tier as of late, and he's going to remain there for now with this nerf coming through. So we already covered how top lane Volibear should be gaining power for this patch, but jungle Volley is more likely on the decline. Even with this base armor and base AD going up, with Q movement speed down and with E losing damage to monsters, he probably drops down a bit in priority moving forward. Now, there is a chance that with his base AD buff coming through and with Trinity Force becoming more popular on Volibear, that the change is significant enough to outweigh the nerfs. If you guys are unaware, the Spellblade proc from Trinity Force scales off your base AD, so base AD buffs are always a little more impactful for champions that like to build Trinity. If you're playing Cosmic Drive Volibear, then we definitely think he should be weaker moving forward, but if you're opting for Trinity, then he won't be losing as much power, and on the off chance, could gain power for this patch. So for now, we're going to demote Volibear out of the jungle OP tier, but we'll just be dropping him down one tier into S. It's been a rough couple of months for the few Skarner mains out there, as the champ has been a C tier pick for a while, but Riot finally has a few buffs lined up for 25.22. It looks like they're putting emphasis on rewarding more offensive Skarner builds, as his Q bonus AD ratio is going up from 80 to 90%. Q cooldown is being changed so that it is no longer 13 scaling to 7 seconds after the first cast, and will instead be 8 scaling to 4 seconds after the last offensive action. E will now have a bonus AD ratio as it never had one before, and it's going to be at least 120%. AD growth is going up from 3 to 4, which is actually a really massive buff, as this adds on 17 AD at level 18, which is equivalent to 595 gold worth of stats. And then there is one nerf coming through with Skarner's R cast time going up from 0.65 to 0.75 seconds. So one thing to keep a close eye on for this patch is a potential surge in power for AD bruiser setups. Something like a Titanic Hydra Rush into Sterix Gauge second could become a lot better due to these AD buffs. Even Trinity Force will look a lot better on Skarner because of his AD growth going up so significantly. All in all, we do think Skarner should be in a much more competitive spot for solo queue moving forward, so we will be bumping him into B tier, but take that rating with a grain of salt for now, because he could even end up needing a bump higher if these bruiser builds do end up adding a lot of strength to the champ. So for the jungle tier list in 25.22, with Volibear dropping out of the OP tier, we're going to move Diana back up alongside Jax as two of the most powerful junglers of the patch. The Halo Blades buffs are going to be interesting to track for this patch, as Shaco is one jungler who should see a nice indirect boost in power, so we're moving him up into the A tier. For any Ivern players out there, he is a jungler who likely sees the biggest indirect boost for this patch due to cashback, Nimbus Cloak, and the movement speed shard getting buffed. Ivern is one of the few champs that was already prioritized prioritizing the movement speed shard in recent patches, so he'll get a nice boost there. Ivern had been on the fence between A and S tier in recent patches, so with a lot of these rune changes going in his favor, we will be slotting him into S. There could be a world where Hail of Blades Master Yi makes his way back into meta depending on how impactful the buffs to the rune actually are, so be on the lookout for that as well. There's a lot of potential moving parts for this patch depending on how a lot of the rune changes land, so we will be sure to provide you guys with a more extensive update during our mid-patch tier list update. For mid lane in 25.22, we have a few champs being adjusted, and Aurelion Sol is first up. Movement speed is going up from 335 to 340, while Q burst base damage is being increased from 55 scaling to 95 to 60 scaling to 100. So nothing over the top with these buffs, and we don't expect for Aurelion Sol to become an S tier pick because of them, so we'll be leaving him in the mid lane A tier. Yone is going to receive another buff for this patch, with his Q base damage being increased from 20 scaling to 120 to 25 scaling to 125. So a 5 damage boost in all ranks, which isn't insignificant considering you can spam the ability pretty frequently in an extended skirmish. With that being said, we don't think the buff will be quite enough to warrant a move into A tier, so we'll be leaving Yone in B for 25.22. Akshin is going to receive 2 direct nerfs for this patch, with his base health going down from 630 to 610, and then Q cooldown is being increased from 8 scaling to 5 seconds to 9 scaling to 5 seconds. Something to keep in mind though is that Akshin's best rune page right now has him running triple tonic as a secondary rune, so with that rune getting buffed, it will help to minimize the effects of these nerfs. Overall, we don't see Akshin losing enough power to demote him down the tier list, so he will remain in the mid lane A tier. So LeBlanc's time in the OP tier will be coming to a close for 25.22, as Riot will be nerfing her health growth, going from 111 to 108, and nerfing her armor growth, dropping from 4.7 to 4.2. It's definitely not anything out of this world that will make LeBlanc a terrible pick, but she had been just barely latching onto that OP tier spot over the past patch, so we are dropping her down into S tier due to these nerfs. So for the mid lane OP tier in 25.22, Morgana and Diana continue to lock down a spot, while Nefiri is taking LeBlanc's place. Nefiri is a mid lane assassin that you don't want to be sleeping on for this patch. Hail of Blades buffs are amazing for Nefiri, as it has been her best performing keystone in recent patches. Voltaic Cyclo Sword as a rush item, making its way into meta on Nefiri, is also providing her with a lot of additional power, as it was always a good pickup on her, but it wasn't until these past few patches where players caught on to its strength. If you're a mid lane Echo player, then definitely consider running Hail of Blades instead of Electrocute moving forward. Hail of Blades has already been outperforming Electrocute analytically, so with the rune getting buffed, that gap should widen even more. AP Cho'Gath has kind of fallen out of priority after being a pretty insane pick earlier in the season, but it's worth considering again for 25.22 with the Hail of Blades buffs, and we're adding the champ back into the mid lane A tier. So there's literally nothing cooking for the ADC role in 25.22, as Riot has decided to largely ignore the role, besides a few rune changes that will have minor influence. So the OP tier will stay the same, with Ashe and Jinx being the 2 most optimal carries. The Bloodline and Biscuits changes are the 2 rune adjustments that will impact the role ever so slightly. With Biscuits nerfed, it does put a dent in the inspiration secondary page of going free boots with Biscuits. However, you can just swap out Biscuits for Cosmic Insight, and the page remains really good. For someone like Ashe who goes Biscuits with approach velocity, you can just go boots and approach velocity, and her strength as an ADC doesn't change at all. If anything, the Biscuits changes will just punish players who autopilot the page every game, and reward those who take an alternative approach, but shouldn't lead to any specific ADCs jumping up or down in power. There's just one support on the change list for this patch, and it's Blitzcrank, as Riot will be buffing his E with the cooldown dropping from 9 to 7 seconds at rank 1. So this does 2 things for Blitz. The first is that it actually makes maxing your W out second even more valuable. Going from 9 down to 5 seconds is a pretty big gap, so maxing E out second in 25.21 made sense, but going from 7 down to 5 isn't as big of a deal. W max second on Blitz already had a higher win rate than E max second in 25.21, so we expect for that gap to get even bigger moving forward, and it's a way you can optimize your Blitz. And then 2 seconds off the cooldown throughout the early to mid game is just really nice to amplify the skirmish power of Blitz. If he's up in the middle of a fight, then you're always going to be able to use E right off of cooldown, so a 2-second drop is actually a really big buff. The movement speed shard buff along with Nimbus Cloak getting buffed will also indirectly help out Blitz. Analytically, the movement speed shard was the highest win rate shard in that second row for Blitz in 25.21, but only 20% of Blitz players were taking it, so definitely look to swap from scaling health to movement speed for 25.22. In regards to Blitz tier list placement, we are pretty torn on this one because there's definitely a world where everything adds up for Blitz to now be back in an S tier spot. It's really going to come down to how impactful the rune changes are, because we don't think the E buff alone is enough to warrant a move into S tier. For now, we will leave Blitz in A, but we will keep a close eye on him as the patch rolls out, and he could be in line for a move into S for the mid-patch update. So if we have a look at the support tier list, nothing massive will be changing from last patch to now. Hail of Blades buffs have the most potential to impact someone like Pyke and potentially push him into S tier territory, but we feel like the buffs won't be quite enough to do that. Poppy is another support to pay attention to for this patch because of the Hail of Blades buff and the movement speed shard buff. We've already had Poppy up in the S tier, so she will definitely be one of the best melee melee supports that you can play. And then even though Guardian is getting buffed, as we mentioned earlier in the video, the buffs don't seem significant enough to result in Braum, Renata, or Rakan moving up the tier list, so we won't be making any adjustments for them. There are a decent amount of melee supports who like to take biscuits, so in theory, this will give a slight indirect boost to enchanters and mage supports, as their poke will stick a bit more in lane when up against those melee matchups. So overall, Pyke and Poppy will be the two supports gaining the most amount of power for 25.22, while pretty much everyone else stays to the same power level they were in 25.21. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit SkillCapped.com and see the difference. So there you have it everyone, that's a complete look at all the changes and the solo queue tier list for every role as we head into 25.22. Thank you all so much for watching, we'll see you in the next one.